So this is going to be a quick live. This is, I'm going to read excerpts from Revelations of the Aramaic Jesus in Aramaic, written by Neil Douglas-Klotz. He's also the author of Prayers of the Cosmos. And I think it's, so what I'm reading to you is the introduction. You shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free. John 8:32. When, or if Jesus said these words, he said them in Aramaic, one of several ancient Semitic languages rooted in thousands of years of Southwest Asian nomadic experiences. In Jesus' Aramaic, the word for truth, shrara, means a light or clarity coming from the heart that leads one in the right direction for the moment. People who traveled seasonally without any permanent dwelling concerned themselves with finding such a light, an inner GPS. The word no, yeda, in Aramaic means to grasp or to hold something in one's hand so that one can use it. The word for free, ashar, points to burning or leaving things behind that one no longer needs. Through Aramaic, we can hear this saying tell us, if you find a light emanating from the heart, it would lead you in the right direction. You'll know what to hold on to and what to release. Jesus is not talking about knowing or believing in particular ideas, but about a way of living freely from within a sense of divine guidance. Over the past 40 years of talking and writing about the Aramaic language and Yeshua, Jesus' name in Aramaic, which I use interchangeably with the English one, I have found people most frequently ask questions about universal themes and problems we all face today, rather than about theology and belief. Among those I've heard are, what did Yeshua see as the ideal relationship between human beings and nature, as well as between people in a community? How do evil and injustice fit into Jesus' view of life? What was his remedy in all of his applicable now? Does life have meaning and purpose in Yeshua's teachings? An approach to Yeshua's recorded words and teachings through his native language answers these questions clearly and consistently, even if unexpectedly, no matter which gospel you have in your hand. Why am I reading this tonight? Because somebody made the comment that the Bible was never, ever, ever edited. And the Bible has always been edited. Always. In fact, the last time it was edited, from what I've studied, would have been about 200 years ago through Darby. And Darby bringing his Bible, his changes of the rapture to Cecil Schofield, hence the Schofield Bible. So your evangelistic nuts out there that are promoting that that Jesus will come back and be the ruler of the planet it's such a blasphemous thing to say. And this is coming from a non-Christian. And the reason why I put separation between the New Age myself and Christianity myself is that I like to say that I am here, and many of us are like me, in that we are following the truth and we are looking at the linguistics of what happened to bastardize his words. So when you read Jesus in Aramaic, you're reading the closest truth. When you're reading Jesus that was taken from the Aramaic, translated into the Greek, then into the Latin, Hebrew, and then finally the common language of English, French, Italian, or Spanish. If you've ever played the telephone game, you know the problem right there. That is a problem. In my experience, most people who in their hearts find friends in Jesus want to know how he prayed and how he acted. That is what his own spiritual practice was and how he confronted life challenges. They're less interested in spending time learning or justifying a catalog of beliefs about Jesus. This book, therefore, is for anyone who wants to follow in Yeshua's footsteps, no matter how a society or church describes them. Right now, what's happening in the evangelistic community, it is unfucking matched what's happening in this country with the evangelist. The fact that many of us grew up watching these people peddle the Bible like some kind of Las Vegas slot machine at 3 o'clock in the morning in the 70s and 80s and 90s and begging for money and yelling and screaming and speaking in tongues and looking demonically possessed, bragging about their mansions and bragging about their suits and bragging about their planes and how they paid cash, has come to the fore once more due to the lady, the formula, baby formula lady. She has put foot to ass without even knowing she was putting foot to ass. And so if you want a relationship with what created you in this incarnation, you want to see how they bastardize, the Bible. And anyone who's in the spiritual community knows that the Bible was spackled together from a team of misogynistic bishops with emperor. He was an emperor, Emperor Constantine, and Constantine before it became Istanbul, because right when it was the Byzantine Empire, it was an empire, and they found that Christianity needed to be controlled. It was problematic. And how to control it, but to write the book in their way, to control the masses through psychological manipulation, by, again, spackling together what they wanted and throwing away and burning. And this was done many, many times throughout Christianity, things like the Gospel of Mary. And people love to deny these unearthed, buried scrolls that were buried by the Essenes, who were terrified, who were contemporaries of Yeshua, who were terrified that what they were talking about, equality among women and men, for example, which the Cathars have talked at length about, the Cathars believed in around the 12th and 13th century. But back there, 2,000 years ago, the Essenes are shoving scrolls that they've copied and buried them in the caves of the mountains in the Sinai desert. We probably will still keep finding ancient scrolls, and I hope it falls into the right hands of people that have integrity and honor, who only want to share the truth with the world. But so far, we have a lot of people who don't have integrity, especially in these churches. You have to ask yourself, when men, and again, not all men, okay, but a huge amount of men who decide to somehow find the right scripture to say it's okay for a 60-year-old man to marry a 14-year-old girl. Okay? Like, for example, in Utah. You and I both know that's fucking gross. And a man in his 40s shouldn't even be looking, much less thinking of marrying a 14-year-old girl, adding to his stable, his little harem of, 10 women. There's something weird about that. And it's really harming people. And it's harming entire generation, and it has done so for a couple centuries. So I'm going to continue, because, again, this book is Jesus in Aramaic. Okay? If you really want to know, this is what kills me with Christians, is they'll say, I am a devout, I just love Jesus, I just want Jesus. Okay, well, if you want to know Jesus, you'd think you'd start looking at this scholarly and not just rely on one preacher and one book. You'd go out there and go, what was hidden? By the way, the book is The Hidden Teachings on Life and Death by Neil Douglas-Klotz, who I think was Scottish. Okay? Yeah. He wrote this in Scotland. You would think anybody that loved Jesus would say, I want to know. Well, go. There are tons of books. Go find out who he was. Instead of sitting in the pew every Sunday and just drinking the Kool-Aid. Feels like a cult to me. Cult is what cult likes. They act like cults. Thank you. I agree. Me too. Unfortunately. So let's continue. I mean, I'm not here to be evangelizing anything, okay? I believe in many, many great avatars, great men and women who walk this planet. Many of them will never remember their names because it was struck, it was buried, and it was also burned by the orders of popes and emperors and kings in the ancient world. So let's continue. We will find many places in the world where people do follow in Jesus' footsteps and are oppressed for being Christians. For example, in the ancient homeland of the Aramaic Christians, in what we are now parts of Turkey, Syria, and Iraq, there are those places where Christians continue to follow the essence of Jesus' way of life in order to bring justice to their fellow human beings. I hope that these believers and practitioners also find their lives and service supported by this book. So background. My own parents were free-thinking Christians, deeply involved in holistic health, organic gardening, and received wisdom from within. I like to say that beyond being read Bible stories each night before bed, I was raised with a holy trinity of 3 C's: chiropractic, Rachel Carson, and Edgar Cayce. By the way, I did a whole thing on Edgar Cayce. He's an asshole. You can look at my live on YouTube on Edgar Cayce. I break it down. Beware, and I don't think this guy knew, to be fair, but let's move on. As part of Lutheran schooling, that's funny because I went to a Lutheran school in Hong Kong, and that's where I had Bible study. I only had it for 1 year, but boy, did it fucking mark me. I remember a lot of shit. I also memorized large parts of the King James Bible translations, as well as most of Luther's small catechisms. Well, we know about King James now, don't we? Okay, let's move on. It's like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, as he's writing, I like this man, but he's kind of naive. I hate to say that. But I love his work because he's a linguistic scholar. So let's go with that, right? Hang on, let me move. I was watching AI version of The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, but hang on, okay? I'm thinking... do you guys know about King James and what he was all about? His story about King James. I just want to make sure to preface. Hang on, okay? I can't find anything right now. But suffice it to say, let me just put it down when I spoke about it yesterday, is that any religion that's going to shame people that are gay or lesbian, and that have caused people take their lives because they're gay or lesbian, is not good. It's actually an evil system. It's an evil system of oppression and shaming. And as you know, when people took their lives, if you watch the movie Kingdom of Heaven, which is very well illustrated, you weren't able to be buried in sacred ground. You were treated like shit. Your body, your remains were treated like shit. Watch the movie Kingdom of Heaven, directed by Scott. I forgot his fucking first name, but anyway. So he talks about Edgar Cayce as well as Lutheran schools. He talks about King James translations. While all this made for an unusual childhood, I never regretted it. Yet I never would have anticipated becoming involved in Jesus' Aramaic language. It was only because I was also raised hearing multiple languages, German, Polish, Yiddish, in the homes of my grandparents, and that I thought, how hard can it be? Little did I know. By the way, Aramaic is still spoken in the East. For several hundred years, the scholarly world has divided the fields of language, psychology, philosophy, spirituality, and science. So to make a long story short, my doctorate in religious studies ended up combining ancient Semitic language, Hermeneutics, interpretation theory, and somatic body-orientated psychology in order to be able to begin to articulate an epistemology, a way of knowing that approached that of Yeshua. One also has to learn to use yet another special and somewhat opaque language, the academic one. Yet my interests and passions were driven by my childhood spiritual experience of Jesus as well as later ones, such as when I began to chant the first words of his prayer in Aramaic, Avun. This began many experiences that are beyond words. The academic study then became all about making connections that others largely had not given the intuitive gifts I was born with and the tools I acquired. Let me stop here for a minute. If you ever have heard somebody chanting, right, in Sanskrit, right, which is a a dead language, okay, which they use in AI. They code AI with it because it's a mathematical language. If you've ever heard the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, which you would have heard, you would have heard in the whole movie that Mel Gibson did, The Passion of the Christ, which is in Latin and Aramaic. When he says the Lord's Prayer in that movie, it's chilling. And the actor who played Jesus still remembers that Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, and people ask him to say it, and it's pretty intense. It's very intense because our souls remember. Our souls remember ancient languages, and if we don't, let's say I'm full of shit and we don't, I do know this. The vibration of ancient languages are so pure in resonance, and there's such a frequency that we miss because the current English, the current French, the current Italian and German are relatively new. 500 years ago, English, French, and so forth was not as it is today, especially French. And I believe Italian, if I'm correct. So these languages have morphed over time as culture, society developed, okay? So past work united both of those who doubt whether Jesus said anything and those who believe he said everything that the gospel report. The simple, undeniable message of this book is, as in my others, is that when or if Jesus said anything, he said it in Aramaic. Let me pause. Did you know that Allah means the God in Aramaic? Did you know that Yeshua would have said Allah, meaning the God? Did you know that? Because I didn't know that until this year. And that is lying by omission. Because that's a kind of an important fact to realize that Jesus said Allah, the God, in Aramaic. To me, that is extremely important to know. And you know why? In my first book, Prayers of the Cosmos, 1990, I did a multi-level rendering of each line of Jesus' prayers, usually called the English, the Lord's Prayer, as well as the Beatitude in Matthew. In the Hidden Gospel, 1999, I considered in depth the 10 most important Aramaic words and Semitic concepts Jesus used so that the readers could begin to decipher whatever version of the gospel they were using for themselves, and also to decode Jesus' spiritual practice. Over the years, as I've continued researching and teaching, I reconsidered these and my other translations and commentary in Blessings of the Cosmos. By the way, that's a book you can look up on eBay called Blessings of the Cosmos by Neil. You just put Neil Douglas and it'll come up. Okay? All right. Let me continue. While it may be helpful to have read my previous book, it is not necessary to... It is not necessary in order to understand this one. I'm not writing for the biblical scholar, but for the devotee of any path who wants to understand better what Yeshua teachings mean for them today. Do you understand? We're supposed to find God within ourselves, and we're supposed to listen to the great words of the ancient ones that walked and spoke and tried to teach through parables and so forth. We're supposed to do the research on ourselves. We're not supposed to sit in a church and listen to people evangelizing about their agendas. Now, don't get me wrong. There's some really great preachers out there, but they're few and far. Just like there's great psychics and great spiritualists and healers, but they're not that many. They're out there, but you got to look, okay? So let me continue. Those who have spent time with my prior work will hopefully find that the whole picture of Yeshua's teaching and spirituality comes into clear focus as I fill in new insights, tie things together here. Okay. One can find the essence of what Yeshua is talking about in my translation, Love, Justice, Reliance on God. Viewed through Aramaic, he reveals much, much more. What I at least intend to do is clear up outright mistranslations. Did you hear that? and very limited translations that have obscured his spiritual way or been misused for political or institutional purposes. To put to the point more strongly, looking at Jesus' word through Aramaic with its corresponding worldview yields a much clearer, more consistent picture of his teachings than any other later projections of either theology, academia, or politics. This is a big statement, but I hope to convince you of it. Conversely, there are many ideas attributed to Jesus that he simply could not have thought or taught. And right now, you know what I'm talking about. The big question, the big thing that's being manipulated is that the rapture has been manipulated, the Messiah, Jesus coming back, the fact that we have to sacrifice human beings for Jesus to come back. You gotta be fucking kidding. Talk about pissing on his teachings. That's to me, that's it. You want to talk about blasphemy? That's blasphemy. What they're doing right now. And you're watching it in real time. Text and contemplation. In approaching Yeshua's words, I use the ancient Syriac Aramaic text in the version of the Bible still used by Aramaic Christians today. I describe this text in chapter 1. I also occasionally compare Aramaic words to related ones in ancient Semitic sister languages, Biblical Hebrew, Quranic Arabic. Using this comparative view reveals a common approach to experiencing life that extends over thousands of years and reaches back into prehistory. As mentioned, the way that ancient Semitic languages express their experiences of reality is rooted in a nomadic hunter-gatherer culture that predates agriculture. While localized in Southwest Asia, this origin reflects humanity's universal shared childhood in other parts of the world. The Semitic language's root in pattern systems, which I also described in chapter 1, builds up words and meanings from simple single sounds or breaths that express our early human perception of the world. Do you understand what I'm saying here? If they really wanted you to know, you know who I mean by they. The Catholic Church, the Protestant, Anglican, Lutheran, Mormon, whatever. They would actually take Yeshua's words and translate it directly from Aramaic into the common language of English, French, Italian, whatever, Dutch, whatever. Immediately, Chinese. But they haven't. Because it's gone through 4 levels, as I said. Greek, right? Greek, Hebrew, Latin, and then English. So 3 languages, 3 or 4. Does that make sense? So the essence, the power of what is said by an avatar, right, is going to be completely freaking diluted. Let's not mention the fact that then after that, they made sure to change the words, because when you can literally change a whole entire sentence by how you punctuate it and how you move a word or remove a word. And you know this. That's why it's insane. And that's why it's your responsibility to go out and seek books of scholars, theologians who understand that we've been hustled, we've been played. These languages also chronicle the growing differences between the ever-changing independent nomadic way of life and the increasingly individualistic direction of settled life. Yeshua acts with a foot in both of these worlds, the connected and the individual. And he uses Aramaic in a strikingly poetic way that both illuminates very contemporary challenges and breathes life into a deeper vision of what human life can be. As in my other books, I have included brief meditative contemplations which invite the reader into the inner sense of Yeshua's words, sensing our breathing and being aware of its internal sounds open us to a different, more original level of our human consciousness. Sorry, this is driving me crazy. Hang on. bear with me, one not so dependent on what the English poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge called the tyranny of the eye, combining the awareness with a feeling of connections to Yeshua by using a word or two from his language has opened me and many others to the wordless experience to which he points. I have minimized the use of special linguistic symbols and instead informally rendered Aramaic into English characters suited to breathing or chanting the words in a contemplative way. This sort of transliteration is approximate, so don't be amazed or upset if you find some inconsistencies. Ancient Semitic languages have many letters and sounds that Western language don't. For instance, different types of H sounds. I mentioned the significance of some of these differences. Hang on. So he continues, I mentioned the significance of some of these sounds when it's necessary to understand a particular piece of wisdom Yeshua is offering. Also, some sounds are only communicated orally and not even written in Aramaic. A spoken language always precedes its written form. In this book, I had an approximation of these sounds to enable Western people to breathe within. Did you hear how he keeps saying breathe, breathe, breathe? The breath of saying a word, but not not an English word, not a French word, not these ancient languages trigger something in our memories. Many of us have been incarnated again and again, and we spoke these dead languages. And when we hear these dead languages, and I quote unquote dead languages, there's something in us that feels the melancholy of homesickness, and we can't fathom why. And in this case, sometimes it is dead languages. We don't exactly know how Yeshua pronounces Aramaic. My own rendering are based on 40 years of work with the underlying ancient Semitic sounds as they arrive in late ancient Hebrew and Aramaic at the time of Jesus. My personal experience is that approaching these with a sense of devotion and heartfelt inquiry will tune a person in the meaning and atmosphere behind his words in Aramaic or ancient Hebrew, his Shem. While you might be tempted to skip these contemplations in order to get to the next bit of text, I would encourage you to take an extra minute and consider the whole book as slow food. This also means that if you are approaching the Aramaic words of Jesus for the first time, and you need to be patient, some things you will understand immediately, others not. Upon first reading, you will probably skip over large amounts of Aramaic translations. Don't be concerned with this. I point out that the main words and the overall picture of what Yeshua is talking about, trust that you need not now, will remain with you, and the rest will resurface when you need it. I'm going to skip. I'm going to skip right now after you just said be patient, but I am going to skip. And I'm going to look at this real quick. And I'm skipping to page 41 should you ever buy this book. It's called The Core. This chapter is called The Core of Yeshua's Way, the Aramaic Lord's Prayer. And so he talks about, hang on, okay? So the contemplation, and you might have read this before, release the fruit, not ours. The tangled cords of life are clear ties to others, returning us to the heart's ripeness in the present moment. Release the fruit, not ours. The tangled cords of life. What do you think it means? It means release the fruits, not ours. That means you let go of what is no longer yours. The tangled cords of life that has entangled you with other people's drama. Perhaps your family, perhaps people you've lived with, perhaps even your job, the people that work at your office. They're bullshit. Release it. Our clear ties to others. Yeah, your ties to your family. Returning us to the heart's ripeness in the present moment. Returning, in other words, to the heart's ripeness is about the expression of the pureness of your heart when you let go of the drama, when you walk away, when you let go, when you're in the presence of yourself. And how beautiful and at peace you can be. And how your heart can be so filled with Wisdom. Contemplation. I breathe in the heart with the word for releasing, shlo'ian, and emphasize my exhalation over my inhalation for a moment. I lean forward and again imagine placing my forehead on the earth. Can I let go of any impressions of myself or others that are no longer useful? I feel my heart being washed with forgiveness for the past, heartbeat by heartbeat. And this is in Aramaic. Wela talen lesniyuan ela patsan min bisha. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Matthew 6:13, Luke 11:4. For Jesus and the prophets of Southeast Asia, we are always middle people, living between the limited personal self, napsha, and the unlimited, always connecting soul, ruha. These lines offer one way to maintain healthy limits on the napsha, providing buffers on two sides so that it can regularly touch base with ruha. Vela talen len sinuana. First thing first, most people are simultaneously shocked and relieved to hear that the Aramaic word tala means to enter rather than to lead. The phrase, lead us not into temptation, becomes let us not enter into temptation. According to it makes a big fucking difference, okay? When you hear let us not lead us not into temptation, as opposed to let us not enter into temptation, according to the early 20th century Aramaic Christian scholar George Lamsa, those who translated Jesus' Aramaic into Greek simply mistook the passive voice of the verb for the active one. In fairness, the Greek version could have also been read, don't allow us to fall, which is also a bit different from lead us, which implies a definite intention. The Greek version could be read, don't allow us to fall into temptation. The first words, really two for us, willa means and not. The final word of the line may be the most significant in light of the line that follows. The Aramaic word nesianu translates best in one word to forgetfulness, which was the ancient Semitic view of temptation. Forgetfulness. Did you hear that? Let me repeat this. The Aramaic word nesiyuna translates best in one word to forgetfulness, which was the ancient Semitic view of temptation. Forgetfulness and temptations have two separate different meanings in English. Completely different. And you know this as a spiritualist. Have we not forgotten ourselves? And we forget ourselves, and we forget our power, and we forget our light, so that we play small. That leads us into temptations. That leads us into addictions. That leads us to want to forget even further and forget even more, because we don't know how to live our power. We don't know how to walk in the light, because we have been taught by nefarious forces who took these words and bastardized them for their own nefarious needs. You see, and forgetfulness and temptation are two different things. It first starts with forgetfulness. It starts there. And from the point of forgetfulness, you start getting led into temptations, which is, I said, the addictions of wanting to not feel anymore. It's a whole different linear path, my friend. In this line, we honestly acknowledge our human condition, the experience of our nafsa, limited by time and space. Our culture today tends to deny limitations in favor of the illusion of unlimited outer freedom. Yeshua warns against such grandiosity, as we shall see in Luke's Beatitudes. Ela patsan min bisha. This line provides another safety barrier for our human path. Ela can be rendered as something like on the contrary, and patsan as to free, open, release, or break a restriction. Min means from or away. The payoff word here, bisha, usually translated as evil, brings us to the heart of the matter, as noted in the introduction. The view in evil in ancient Semitic languages centered around unripeness, that which is either too early or too late, or so cut off from reality that it can no longer ripen in a natural, healthy way. Today, we would probably call inapsa, that is so extremely cut off, narcissistic. We know that it can do great harm. We could hear these lines in this way: don't let us enter chronic forgetfulness of soul and source. I'm going to say it again slowly. Don't let us enter chronic, right? Chronic, perpetual, right? Chronic forgetfulness of soul, your soul, and your source. What is source? The one of 1,000 names, the one who created us all. Source. Let me continue. On the contrary, release us from acting unripely. You're not ripe. And they would have translated that as evil, and that was never the word to be used. Not in tune with our self's healthy purpose. Have you ever heard Yeshua's words like this? Ever? Ever. So let me say it all at once without pausing. Don't let us enter chronic forgetfulness of soul and source. On the contrary, release us from acting unripely, not in tune with ourselves' healthy purpose. Have you ever heard that before? Because it sure in the hell is a completely different meaning. And yeah, I said the word hell. Because you see, when they translated the words the way they did to manipulate the consciousness, the innate guilt, you were born in sin, it brought us in hell. We lived in a planet that made us feel like we were in hell. Because this is how they were telling us what he had said. Such translation doesn't mean that evil doesn't exist. It is up to us individually and collectively to decide for every season, year, and generation what is ripe and what is no longer so. We can easily recall many times in human history when most believed that some behavior, for instance, slavery, was appropriate or necessary, but which is now largely repudiated and outlawed. Simply put, it's up to us to use our freedom of choice to choose ripely. Taken together, we can see how both these lines fit together. One way to always remember would be, for instance, to remain in seclusion in prayer at all times, or simply not get involved in order to preserve our peace and quiet. However, most of us are not called to the life of a monk or hermit, and neither was Yeshua. He called his listeners to act at the right time and place with the right action. Did you hear that? I'm often asked why Jesus phrased this all in the negative. He could have easily said, help us remember and act ripely. However, this would again be to deny that forgetfulness and unripeness happened in us. The first step to avoiding them is to acknowledge them in oneself. Did you hear that? This return to the image of holy wisdom, Hakami in Aramaic, gathering creation as a community of voice, both ripe and unripe. Do you understand the words ripe and unripe? Not evil. Ripe and unripe. Okay? In Luke 14, Jesus retells the story from Proverbs in a different way as a parable about a man who invited people to a dinner party. Since he is A-list and B-list, guests were too busy to attend. He then invited everyone on the street, acknowledging both the invited and unwanted guests in one psyche. Is about a simple self-honesty, a theme that Yeshua returns to frequently in the Beatitudes. Contemplation. Breathing. We, la, ta, lan, le, nes, yo, na. I cross my right arm over my heart, fingertips touching my left shoulder. I feel protected from forgetfulness. That is not remembering my origin within sacred unity. Breathing, O, La, Pa, San, Min, Bi, Sha. I cross my left arm over the right, fingertips touching right shoulder. I feel protected from unripeness, that is, not being present to act in life at the right moment. I continue to breathe the phrases, feeling my heart able to find the middle way between the two extremes. He just said the middle way, which is Buddhist. The middle way. He's going into a meditation. He's somatically connecting with his heart and asking for divine guidance from his heart, the seat of his soul. That's my interpretation, to be clear. And he's feeling, I feel protected from unripeness. At no way does he feel from evil. Unripeness. Am I ready? When will I be ready? And when will I be ready to act right? At the right time, at the right place. The phases, I continue to breathe the phrases, feeling my heart able to find the middle way between the two extremes. The middle way is Buddhist. And why am I saying that? Because I've been reading to you also the concept that, from Elizabeth Clare Prophet, that he went to India, and it's proven. 5, and went to Tibet. 5, not 2, not 1, like they keep pushing. 5 different individuals from 18, what the hell was it? 1887, Nicholas Reck or something like that. I don't have it in front of me. To a woman, to a Bengali man. So it was 2 men by the name of Nicholas. I think one was Russian. He had broken his leg. He went to the Himas temple in Tibet, where he saw that Yeshua had been in Tibet to study. And then some kind of commander, general, an American in 1951 had seen the proof that Yeshua had been in Tibet. 5 people, 1880s, 2 people in 1929, 1 woman in 1939, and finally this man in 1951. By 1959, the Chinese did their thing, meaning they took Tibet, and Tibet was eradicated from the map. It is now called China, as you know, okay? So why am I saying all this? Because this line of to find the middle way between the two extremes is very Buddhist. That's not, no one else is talking like that at that time. Let me continue real quick. I like the contemplations. Matthew's version of the prayer includes this line. Luke's does not. Aramaic Christians traditionally say it as the line perfectly completed and encapsulates the journey of the prayer. Metal, because of deadlock, to or you belong. I'm sorry, I'm going to skip this because it's more into the subtleties of the language. Let me jump here. The ancient nomad's view is that the source of life, life itself, continues to renew itself before, during, and after our individuals' lives. They visualize a moving caravan of ancestors, those going before us, in the past ahead of them, and descendants, those following in our footsteps, as coming, and after behind them in the future. For them, time was not a static line, but of movement, and what could feel past, present, and future journeying together. We normally live in one part of life's caravan, but through contemplation we can connect with that, what is both ahead and behind us. That is very Taoistic, by the way, because in Taoism, the religion that was birthed in China about good action, right action, it's more philosophical and it's more centered. I mean, I'm sure it's much more complicated than what I'm saying, but it's also centered on the energy of your ancestors and honoring your ancestors, okay? And so this feeling of this DNA bloodline connection with those who came before you, and you are the one that's present, and those who will come after you, right? In the future of you when you're long gone. And this intense connection from the past, the present, and the future creates right action. It creates a sense of responsibility. It creates a sense of love. The concept of, I will build fruit trees fruit trees that I will never enjoy because I will be long dead, but I do it for the greater good. I do it for those who will enjoy the fruits of the trees I now plant. But they will not mature in my lifetime. They will mature long, long after I'm gone. So it's a sense of responsibility for those in the future, which we've lost. I'm sure you've noticed that. We've lost that. Amen is usually translated as Amen. Let me spell this for you. Amen. A-M-E-Y-N is Aramaic. It's usually translated as Amen. That is not translated at all. Most people simply presume what it means is the end. However, as a number of Aramaic scholars have noted, this word was used to seal verbal agreements at the time of Jesus, meaning, I promise to be true to what I have said. Again, this is a simple but not simplistic ancient idea of words spoken, action done. The roots point to the sensation of the earth supporting one from underneath. So they express, I stand on what I say. Some form of this word appears throughout the Semitic language. The concept of the earth's support also then points to the idea of trust and faith. So it could, I'm going to interpret this as saying, Amen. Amen would mean my word is my bond. My word is, I stand on my word. If I tell you I will come and bring you help to build your barn tomorrow morning, I will be there. Is how I'm interpreting that concept. The divine vision, energy, and song accompany us on this journey. May all I have set be the earth from which my new growth springs. Contemplation. When arms still cross over my heart, I lean back gently. I again feel my own individual relationship to sacred unity as I say, Meto, Dilakt, E, Malkuta. Again, this is Aramaic. I'm probably butchering the hell of it. I continue to intone the following words. Wehela, Vatesh, Bokta. Leading forward, I feel Ela, life, energy in my heart. Then Tish Bukta, song, harmony, and my belly, and going down to the base of my spine. Lalhak, my head turns towards my right shoulder as I feel my connection with all gatherings of visible beings. Almin, my head turns towards my left shoulder as I feel my connection with all helpful beings in the unseen world. Did you see that? Did you hear that? My head turns towards my right shoulder as I feel my connection with all gatherings of visible beings. My head turns towards my left shoulder as I feel my connection with all helpful beings in the unseen world. Amen. As I intone the words slowly, my arms uncross and I open my hands to receive. My hands slowly come down over my head and whole body in blessing. Boy, did they edit the shit out of the Bible. And this was from the Beatitudes in Matthew. Chapter 3, ripening inner presence, the Beatitudes in Matthew. It continues. Yeshua used allusions, pictures, and stories to suggest ways to live that would spark a wordless connection, an aha, in the hearts of his listeners, thereby reflecting the depth of what their ruha already knew. In the Beatitudes, Yeshua invites us further into the story of holy wisdom. In Proverbs, she gathers creation together from many previously unrelated voices before the beginning of time, and existence enlivened by her union with the ever-living life. Her process of gathering and harmonizing repeats itself in human beings. Our consciousness gathers what we call our I, our small self, from the myriad perceptions of what is out there, merged with the thoughts and emotions in here. We might also say that we are continually gathered by a power, Allah. Remember, Allah in Aramaic means the God, which is how Yeshua would have referred to God. He would have said Allah. The irony. Can you imagine Christian theologians know this and they've never told you that? Ever? They've never said that? That should piss you off, because that's lying by omission. But let me continue. That empowers us. We can choose to cooperate with or obstruct the healthy development of our individual and collective humanity. The Beatitudes in Matthew show a way to return to health through awareness, breathing, and heart feeling. Did you hear that? Awareness, breathing, pranayama, and heart feeling. Does that sound the kind of Christianity you've been taught, or does that sound more like Eastern philosophy? of meditation, of pranayama, breathing, of mindfulness. Yeah. Let's continue. Each beatitude begins with the word tub vehun, usually translated as blessed are. The Aramaic word defines this blessed, happy state as one that is tub, ripe, being in tune and in rhythm with the melody of life itself. The ever-living is the essence of what Aramaic calls good. Ripeness exists in the moment. Past and future don't exist when we experience the present. Most of us know this already from moments of falling in love, being passionately immersed in some project, in communion with nature, or simply in a moment of silence. We lose track of time and are willing to be patient, which really means to collapse past, present, and future and only feel the now. Our contemporary human sense of time is relatively new, the product of humanity evolving a consciousness that allows us to feel increasingly more separate from nature and our origins. Humanity formed experiences time as waves, cycles of the sun and moon, and seasons. Now we tend to experience time as disconnected particles, hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds, and so forth, until it becomes something that we sell and buy. Time is money. In Yeshua's day, one could only tell what an hour was by consulting the position of the sun or stars and noticing where one stood on the earth. In those times, each day and night was divided into 12 equal hours, the length of which changed day by day as the amount of daylight or darkness lengthened or shortened. What we call minutes and seconds didn't exist because people did not perceive or conceptualize them. That further slicing and dicing happens much later and allows us to perceive and then seemingly manipulate time in bit by bit waves. By reminding us of ripeness, being in the now, at the uniquely right time and place, Yeshua affirms that we can live a good life even in the midst of its inevitable challenge and difficulties. These difficulties come along with having a napsha, which experiences and learns in the realm of time and space. Heard through Aramaic, the beatitudes develop step by step in an intuitive, deeply affecting way if one has ears to hear. Deep dive. Tub vehon lem kena bruk dilhuni malkuta dashmaya. Blessed are the poor in spirits, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:3. Dub vehon can be translated not only as ripe, but also ripening. We are talking about a continual process as well as a moment in time. As noted, Semitic language don't have being or verbs, so there's no are designating a static, unchanging state. That is, a person can be ripe in one moment, but not the next. In a world seemingly limited by time and space, and states and conditions change, so life calls us to continually return to ripeness. Legmesh kena bruch. The preposition in Semitic sound root I before mesh na means to or towards, indicating a direction of movement. So this is ripeness and ripening towards some temporary condition or state that the rest of the beatitude reframes as opening towards blessings. The root word meshkina points to holding on to something because of dependency. As we say today, holding on for dear life, this is why it can also be translated as poor. The word also includes the feeling of resting in or relying on something because we need security. The something we can rest in our breath and breathing, ruk, a word pointing towards ruha, our soul. As noted in chapter 2, the preposition bih at the beginning can mean with or in or within. The person ripening into life's blessings is holding on to and within breath and through it the soul, as though their life depends on it. From Yeshua and the biblical prophet's point of view, it did. To recall both our human impermanency and origin, we need only to find our home in the breath. The breath. Did you ever get taught that in Sunday school? Meskina can also mean to dissolve, So the more we identify with being breathing, the less attention we give to our self-identity, our nafsha. We can then open to connect deeply with nature or someone we love. This helps explain the attractiveness of popular forms of meditation today. It is a relief not to be me for a moment. Yet, as we'll see, Yeshua's way is not about zoning out or bypassing suffering, but going right into it and through these feelings. Meskina is also lessness. Did you hear that? Lessness. In the sense of carrying less substance, less stuff, whether inwardly or outwardly. If we understand breath as more than our physical breath, then we finally leave our enfleshment. What lingers last is the breath. The aroma of a rose that has already wilted lingers a while. Theological ideas of some abstract spirit obscure what Jesus is actually saying here. The Greek word pneuma, used to translate hot breath and spirit in the Greek version of the Gospels, can be rendered in the same double way. This means that even the English translation and interpretation that rely on the Greek text could have done differently. However, that time people were already losing the sense of that breath as more than a material substance, as by the Middle Ages more than 1,000 years of theology had happened. Yeshua was talking about breathing, about releasing, about being mindful of one's breath. There's a great book that my beloved adored called Breathing by, I think, James Nestor. The concept of how breath can change your assemblage point, your mindset. As a matter of fact, when I do hypnosis, there's a breathing technique I call the train, but it's actually called fire breathing. You can look it up, fire breathing. And when you do fire breathing for just 20 seconds, not only do you get dizzy because you have to breathe only through your nose with your mouth closed, right? And you're going really fast, right? And then slow and fast and fast and slow. Within 20 seconds, your whole nervous system is reset. 20 seconds. It never fails. When I do a hypnosis and a person's going through something weird and we're done with that particular past life or scenery, they do the fire breathing and we've reset to the next vision to come. The power of breath. Have you ever learned that in your Sunday school? Did they ever teach you about breath? I don't think so. As long as we have physical bodies, we hold on to the physical breath for life. And yet there's a breath inside that breath, which from the viewpoint of Jesus' Aramaic connects to soul ruha. This ruha breath is the activity in us that is always connected to reality. Does that sound like Christianity today or even 1,000 years ago? I keep interrupting myself to kind of like let you know, to kind of reset yourself and ask yourself, we are reading a book that translated his words from Aramaic to English, and the meaning is completely different than what everyone has ever studied, has ever read in the Bible. So when people say to me, I read the good book and the good book is this and that, what good book? What good book? By kings and emperors and conquerors? How about reading what he actually said? If you really want to be a Christian, why don't you actually learn how to understand Christianity? Or should we eradicate that word and call it Yeshuism? How about that as an idea? We are going to learn how to be Yeshuistic. We're going to learn how to actually follow Yeshua's disciplines and his goodness. As we continue with the first beatitude, Yeshua further reframes this experience of being breathing as our first and last position. Didhuni, usually translated for theirs, is words Words like this begin with a D occur in most of the beatitudes, indicating a relationship. This comes from the meaning of the Semitic sound root D, pointing to diversity and movement resulting from a natural abundance. Out of abundance, what was one become many, and yet it is still connected. This is a long way around what amounts to a one-letter preposition, yet it reveals how our later ideas of possession arise. Belongingness is built into life here. Bear with me. Hang on, they're trying to make me do the puzzle. Okay. In the present word, the syllable hun follows, related to some living person or being. It is a form of the word hu or hua, which in Aramaic means to come into being, to live, or as a command, live. Taken together with the beginning of the saying, the whole word reveals that finding one's home in the breath generates a living experience of empowerment, as well as a greater connection with what we find in the next two words, Malkuta dash Maya. We found both of these words in Jesus' prayers. Malkuta is the I can of the cosmos, the awareness of the vision and power, in waves of life, light, sound, and vibration. Shemaya. All around us, awareness of our own breathing, connecting with nature around us, allow a deeper empowerment to stream into our own I can. We can do this anywhere. Malkuta is not limited to any one sacred place or person, much less to a belief structure or institution. Here are some expanded translations of the first beatitude from Aramaic. Blessed, ripening into life and its empowerment, moves toward those who cling to their breathing as their first and last possession. Ripe are those who dissolve their small selves within breath. They live in the shimmering I can of nature and the cosmos. Did any of your preachers ever read this to you? Did you ever sit in the pews and hear a pastor, a preacher, a monk read this to you? And if not, why not? What are they teaching in these theological schools? Contemplation. I again place one hand lightly over my heart and breathe in a relaxed way. I slowly say the word tubveyan, first outwardly, then inwardly. As the words dissolve into the feeling of my breathing heartbeat, I sense a spaciousness opening my heart. I again intone the word outwardly but slowly in rhythm on any note that resonates in my chest. After some time I return to silence and stillness. I feel nature, the whole natural world, clothing me in a living breath, a woven tapestry of many breaths, all contained in the larger breath that Yeshua calls Ruha, Daksha, the sacred or holy breath. I rest in this breath. It is my first and last possession in this embodied life. Does that sound like the Christianity we have been dealing with for the last 2,000 years? Sounds very, very Eastern philosophy to me. Because what is he saying? I say the word out loud and then I say it in silence. What is that? It's called chanting a mantra. What is breathing? Pranayama. Breathing to reset the spirit, to reset the somatic nervous system. So he's actually talking about chanting a mantra and then stopping and then going into breath work. And Christians today will call yoga, chanting, meditating, the devil's work. That's why I'm reading this to you. Because I'm saying some pretty insane shit. Like yesterday, if you look at my live on YouTube yesterday, you'll hear what I'm saying and you'll understand exactly where I'm coming from today. Tub vehun laval di non Net Bahun. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Matthew 5:4. One of the difficulties with that usual translation of the Beatitudes is that they lend themselves to the idea that if I feel bad now, I will get my reward later in heaven. Yet delayed gratification is not what Yeshua is talking about. How then is mourning ripe? Before we get into the Aramaic words, we can ask, what prevents us from feeling at home in our breath, from feeling nature's vision and power within us? According to Yeshua, we are holding so rigidity in our nafsha, our small self, it can't fully breathe. That would be your monkey mind. That would be your false ego. The small self is the false ego. Of course, we need some boundaries to hold the self together. Really, from the roots of nafsha, a boundary is what a self is, holding of breath in flesh for a certain number of years. Let me go back for a minute. What did they say? I will own my first breath and my last breath. The day you were born and the day you die. Just in case you didn't catch that, I wanted to bring that up. It is what you own. Your breath is yours. Before, so let's go. Let me go back. So according to Yeshua, we're holding some rigidity in our nafsha, our small self. It can't fully breathe. Of course, we need some boundaries to hold the self together. Really, from the roots of nafsha, a boundary is what a self is, holding of breath in flesh for a certain number of years. Yet extra unhealthy holdings prevent us from feeling connected with life, nature, and our sources. Instead, they keep us feeling isolated. The medicine of this beatitude asks us to notice in a loving, respectful way where a nafsha feels ignored, confused, or isolated. Remember that according to all ancient Semitic creations accounts, life in time and space unfolds in opposites. If there is no possibility of confusion, there would be no possibility of clarity. Labvil, from the main roots B, W, L, and abyss, and L, direction toward. A feeling that carries us beyond what our self recognizes as its limits, off the deep end. Avil can mean to mourn, be confused, feel an emotional turmoil, or wander aimlessly. Some parts of us want to go beyond who we thought we were. Life conspires to help us learn from the turmoil of love or pain or both. If we can feel and name these intense emotions, grief, remorse, confusion, regret, guilt, coming apart at the seams, and still continue breathing, returning to the moment, to ripeness, we can then begin to release what holds us back. These feelings no longer linger in the darkness, which simply means what's unknown in Semitic language, but could stand in the light. We can create a bridge of breath, an awareness to them by naming them. The light, more knowing, then leads to a better understanding of ourselves. Dinun, similar to Dil Nuhi, in the last saying of them, abundantly created from, some being consciously in a state of avil. Nebahyun, from the root bien, birth, conception, new embodiment. This root finds the sound for life, why, within it being, and becomes a sort of innate intelligence which selects the impressions of nature that creates a ripe vision of ourself in the world. By breathing with our confusion, we are rebirthed, knit back together within, ready to see clearly and reunite with the larger universe of life and love. This beatitude is a more surgical letting go than what we found in Yeshua's prayer. Mourning and emotional turmoil can lead us to the doorway of actual recreation, recreating ourselves and our perceptions of the world around us. From the viewpoint of the ancient Semitic languages, the world we have today is the one we have collectively created. Did you hear that? From the viewpoint of the ancient Semitic languages, the world we have today is the one we have collectively created. Collectively created. Beginning with our ways of perceiving it. Technology works because we have hypnotized ourselves to perceive nature as an object. The good news is that we can use the same creative ability of the self, empowered by Allah's malkuta in us, to perceive and then create a different, more balanced relationship with nature and everyone around us. Ripening arrives to those who consciously breathe into the well of their own confusion and grief. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about that. To breathe into your grief, to breathe into your anger, to have compassion and patience with the monkey mind swinging from impossible thought to impossible thought, your body twitching to and fro and unable to sit in a meditation. It is an exorcism. It is a battle between the small self and the big self. Ripening arrives to those who consciously breathe. Have you noticed that when people are angry, sad, scared, they hold their breath? Into the well of their own confusion and grief, they shall find and feel themselves surfacing again with clarity and joy. If you do a 3-part breath, if you do a fire breathing or any pranayama, I guarantee you will reset yourself and wonder why you were absolutely losing your mind with grief. Contemplation. I again breathe the word tub-vehan, in my heart. Then I breathe more deeply in a relaxed way and allow the awareness of my heart to expand so that it extends down into the belly, breathing now with the words lab vi. I notice any feelings of confusion or grief that arise. If they do, I continue to breathe in a spacious way, naming them, finding my peace with them, and eventually letting them be released. They were ripe in the moment, but may not be now. I do not engage in thoughts about each upset. There will always be plenty of these. After some time, I return to breathing tub-vehan. It's not possible for all healing to be completed in one sitting. Life continues to change, and I change with it. I have only begun this process, and the next beatitude takes me further. Tub-vehon lak kikhe dinon nertun Allaha. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Matthew 5:5. Let's briefly recap the process so far. First, we consciously breathe, and then we breathe into the darkness, what we have not been feeling. This opens a way to know more about ourselves. Light is revealed, and we feel a new world open around and within us. This sequence also mirrors the creation story told in Hebrew in Genesis 1-2-3. First darkness and chaos, then the breath of God, Ruha Elohim, which in Aramaic would be Ruha Alaha. Remember, Allah is the God in Aramaic. Moves into and through compressed darkness, the Hebrew word Hoshesh, which when the divine breath stirs with love what is unknown, this leads to spaciousness and light. Here we have the verse usually translated, let there be light. There was light. Consider what happens when we experience periods of confusion, grief, and depression. What we think we know and hold on to dissolves around us. According to Yeshua and the prophets, we then have the opportunity to discover enough of ourselves and enough of our last connections to what endures the soul to guide us through these times and beyond. Our lives in time and space are calibrated, adjusted more precisely by our own awareness of the Ruha, the source of our individuality, which lived before our birth and will live on after our death. In this beatitude, being in the moment, ripeness takes us deeper into the soul connection. La ma kihe, those who are dissolving, softening what is contracted or overly ripe so they can absorb. This directly follows from the previous beatitude. Even the English word meek, used at the time of the translation, had a similar meaning: softness, gentleness, related to the words mucus, a substance that flows and absorbs. Dihnon, of them, abundantly created from being consciously in a state of makihi. Nertun, the ancient Semitic root here is art, which points to strength, warmth, and healing, and is related to ahara, the word for earth itself, usually translated inherit. This word emphasizes that part of us share the same substance as nature. From our deep relationship with earth arise all early ideas of inheritance. Even in Western culture a few hundred years ago, it was considered that land did not belong to us, but that we belong to the land. Who does that sound like? The Native Americans who couldn't conceive the idea of selling their land to the people who took the land. What we inherit, strength and healing, is what is naturally ours as human beings embedded in nature. What is he saying? He's saying it is our birthright, our sovereign birthright, to walk in the land and not pay to live. I'm saying that, but that's my takeaway. The land is the land for all. It's not the land for one. It's not the land for conquerors. It's the land of all. The meek shall inherit the earth. You inherit all of it. You don't pay for water, you don't pay to breathe, and you don't pay to live. In Southwest Asia, story traditions stretching all the way from Genesis through to the classical Sufis like Rumi, we're told that we contain an animal self, a plant self, a rock or mineral self, and by implication a self from the stars. We carry a deep remembrance of nature and nature's activity already within us. Arha, radiance, a wave, a sound, ar, settling and condensing into a form, a particle, the sound ah at the end is one of those denser, enfleshed breath mentioned earlier. This whole world would be better translated as nature, but nature as a living force, not as a collection of objects separated from us. You may have already guessed that the expression translated inherit the earth does not refer to obtaining a piece of real estate. As we saw in the last chapter, earth includes our whole natural existence as human beings, our earthly nature. Here lies the essence of healing. Yeshua offered our home in the breath, in our inner nature. We let go of what is overly rigid inside and are able to absorb what we need, not want, from reality through nature as we perceive it around us. This ripeness is a process, a ripening in the moment of need, not a fixed position of belief. Ripening towards those who soften what's overly rigid within. They naturally absorb healing power, their sustainable inheritance from nature. Apparently, that's the translation of the meek shall inherit the earth. I'll read it again, because I think it's worth saying it all over again. This two-sentence that changes the absolute meaning of the meek shall inherit the earth. Ripening towards those who soften what's overly rigid within. They naturally absorb healing power, their sustainable inheritance from nature. Holy shit. If you're not at this point connecting to nature every day, or bringing nature into your inner eye, third eye, you're not getting it. Contemplation, returning to centering in the heart. I relax and breathe a feeling of softening into my muscles, ligaments, viscera, soft tissue, and my whole self. I breathe the word Maki-Ke, and I feel the pores of my skin open to receive strength from nature around me. If I can do this outdoor, or in the presence of some living plant, all the better. Nothing needs to be done but relax and feel that the seed of my original human nature reconnects with and can receive its natural inheritance from what grows and greens around me. Wow. This book is called Revelation of the Aramaic Jesus, The Hidden Teachings of Life and Death by Neil Douglas-Klotz, K-L-O-T-Z. Neil, like, Neil Young. And there's more, and more, and more, and more, and he breaks it down. I'll read something that I had marked about healing, which I think is important because we all need healing. So this is chapter 6, Healing Those Divided and Ruined in Breath. According to the community that produced the Gospel Mark, Yeshua's main purpose was to heal people of various maladies and purge them of unclean spirits. In fact, if you read the Gospel straight through, which takes very little time, it's difficult to escape the impression that an enormous number of people needed such healing at the time. Wherever Yeshua goes, more and more people flock to him, and the more he tells them to keep quiet about it, the more people they tell others. After a while, instead of telling people to keep silent, he emphasizes that Allaha, remember Allah in Aramaic, has done the healing, not him. He uses the word, for instance, in Mark 10:52, He ma nutak ayatak, meaning your energized trust has renewed your life energy. Did you hear that? Let's listen to it again. So when he's healing people, he's not saying, yeah, right on, I did it. He's saying your energized trust has renewed your life energy. This phrase is usually translated as, your faith has made you whole. Not the same, fucking meaning. And that's why I'm very passionate. So let me repeat it so you can understand the massive difference in translation and why we need to demand the New Testament from Aramaic to English, if you're English or Dutch or whatever. So let's say it again. Your energized trust has renewed your life energy. What does that sound like, life energy? It sounds like chi. That's what they call chi in China, right? And in English, and the way they translate it in the Bible, your faith has made you whole. This is bullshit. I'm sorry. Both words contain a form of a word we see frequently in part 1. Let's first take a more focused look at the type of healing we're talking about. How does it relate to what today we might call exorcism or healing from possession by a spirit? Then we'll view some specific examples and hear what Yeshua says in Mark Gospels about what he's doing. I'm going to stop here for a minute and tell you another thing that I realized. When they talked about him chasing the 7 demons from, and I mentioned this yesterday, the 7 demons from Mary of Magdalena, because, God knows women are shit in the Bible. Let's be honest. We are definitely demonized in many holy scriptures, not just the Bible, but other works. But what does they say? He chased the 7 demons from her. Bullshit. He activated her 7 chakras, and she activated his 7 chakras. There's somebody who was saying, and it's funny how intuitively we're being ignited and we're sharing stories now of our downloads. One woman said, there's a famous scene, he turned water into wine. And she said to her beloved, I think they were married. He was marrying Mary Magdalene. They had run out of wine, and so he turned water into wine. They had run out of wine. And so he would have gone to the east to become an alchemist. Why not? It's funny how we believe in some of the most ridiculous things, but we don't believe in the obvious things. Which, by the way, as I said, was documented in the lost years of Jesus. He was there. And he studied there. And left when he was 29. As noted, humanity's view of life and nature in the ancient world was very different from ours today. The Napsha, the personal self, was both more interconnected and less individual, less selfie or selfish, just as we see the world Ruha, meaning both physical breath and soul and spirit. All other words also pointed to a more interconnected both and relationship between what we now feel as taking place inside of us and what we perceive to be external. Throughout our tour of Yeshua's main teaching in Aramaic, so far we have seen his view of things and processes being diverse in a unified field without being separated and divided from one another. I can't overstate that such a basic view was not unique to Yeshua. Aramaic, or the Semitic languages in the ancient world, the way words develop everywhere around the world, provides a sort of archaeological linguistic record of the way that human consciousness evolves, both for better and for worse. Instead of simply seeing a tree as a physical object outside of themselves, and even less so as a potential piece of lumber to make a table, ancient peoples tended to perceive them as part of their own outer inner landscape. Did you hear that? The respect for nature. The utter respect for nature. Perhaps this particular tree embodied a specific spirit, entity, or cosmic force. Hence we find throughout the world stories about tree beings, devas, nature spirits, demons, fairies, and so forth. Today we consider such views illusionary or human projections that occurred while people were waiting to discover the factual, that is, material basics of life. In other words, they would eventually be persuaded that out there-ness is the only reality. No more need to be said about the ecological and social problems that this gradual encroaching materialistic perspective has inflicted on humanity. Another way of looking at ancient ways of knowing would be to compare them with the way we extend the feeling sensation of our bodies to include their clothes they were wearing. When we put on gloves, for example, and touch anything, the gloves become a part of us touching that. When we hold hands with a person through gloves, we feel the person, not the gloves, even though we can notice the sensation of the fabric. If we choose to just so, ancient people felt nature as an extension of themselves, diverse but not separate, like the whiter clothing of their consciousness. What we totally today experience as exclusively internal or subconscious, one of many words that didn't exist in ancient times, was in some sense being woven and worn around us in ancient times. In this sense, when we consider today's solely physical ailments, would in ancient times have been both psychological and spiritual components. I put all of these words in quotation marks because the way we use them today divides life into seemingly separate areas of concern. Remember that the ancient Semitic languages only had one preposition. That means that both within and around. Failing to note even this simple linguistic fact has led scholars into all sorts of confusion about what Yeshua said and did. Did you hear that? Around and within. Around and within. So why is it so shocking when people put their spine up against the tree and drop down to the root of the tree and go into meditation? They feel such unbelievable peace and they feel a connection to the tree, to the point that the tree, they develop and they feel silly and they feel the tree is their ally. It becomes their favorite tree. It's the tree they go visit when they cry. It's the tree they visit when they want to celebrate. It's the tree that will listen and not judge. And they feel as if there must be some kind of spirit in that tree. It must be real. And we have lost our association to nature and what Yeshua was teaching and what many of his contemporaries were teaching is the connection of yourself and outside of yourself was moving like a beautiful sea of consciousness. The tree, the wheat field, the olive trees, the apple tree, the river, the ocean, the sand, the very earth spoke. The sky, the wind, the sun, the moon, the stars, the planets. It was within us and out there around us. And there was a interconnectedness that is so like, feel the force, Luke. Feel the force, Luke Skywalker. Feel the force. Close your eyes. And Yeshua, you could say, was a Jedi master. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? That's why it's good to step out, leave the church, leave the temples, leave the synagogues, and read. Read from linguists. Read from people who are really looking to connect the truth. They're not here to get money to buy a plane. They're not here to make you feel guilty. They just write the book because I don't think this man made a shitload of money writing these books. I'll be honest. Oh, thank you, my love. Thank you, sweetie. Thank you. I go. Thank you, James. It's good to see you. Does that make sense? Like, I really doubt, knowing, because I'm a writer myself, these people writing books like that, you're not paying their mortgage, okay? It's probably an extra 10 grand a year if they're lucky. Healing even the so-called physical maladies in the ancient world always involved a recognition of the seen and unseen, of all the worlds, Alma, healing them, reconnecting heart, breath, and self through soul with Heya, Dhamma, the source of life energy that infuses all the worlds. Do you understand that these people, these Christians, these evangelist fucks call people who speak like that demonically possessed, and yet this is actually the truth of what Yeshua was saying in Aramaic? Do you understand the dissonance? I don't know what they learned to be pastors, preachers, and whatever, to spread the word of God and to talk about how we're going to increase the map, and this whole map is going to be, you know, our covenant, and Yeshua is going to come and he's going to be the kingdom of the planet. He didn't want to be the kingdom of a planet when he was out in the wilderness for 40 fucking days. Why would he now suddenly want to be an emperor? When he could have been an emperor 2,000 years ago, he fought the demon, the Satan, and said no. So now suddenly Yeshua's going to come back in a private jet and a suit and a tie and with spat-plat shoes, whatever the fuck, and walk in and go, yeah, I'm ready to take over the planet now. I didn't do it last time, but this time, yeah, I want it all. I want to be rich and famous. That's what I want. Yeah, do you understand what they're selling here? They're all on the payroll. All of them. They're on the payroll. Unless they're speaking the truth, unless they're going out to get more studied. And let's not forget the Vatican having miles and miles of fucking holy scriptures that we will never, well, maybe one day hopefully you'll be old enough to fucking see these scriptures pulled out of the Vatican, and the right scholars with the right integrity translating and publishing facsimiles of the documents. On one side, the facsimiles of the documents, on the other side, the translations. You'll have the kind of thing where you can actually scan it on your phone and we'll translate it for you by that time. So you can't be, fucked over by fake translators and people who want to bullshit you. Yeah. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? Yeah. If a person had become obsessed or possessed by an unhelpful channel of life and light in the unseen world, this unripe connection would maintain itself via a napsha, divided in itself and divided from its source, ruha. Not surprisingly, it is in Mark that Yeshua makes the following statement. And if a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand. No one can enter into a strong man's house and spoil his goods, except he will first bind that strong man, and then he will spoil his house. The word here for strong one, ha-shiana, man, is not present in the text, shows someone who can hold into things that are in harmony with their own natural nature. This happens when the two breaths, napsha and ruha, are united, not divided. The healer who can perceive and act from both napsha and ruha simultaneously can touch the whole breath of a person with light and life from the source Allaha. For those who don't know, Allaha is Allah. It means the God in Aramaic. A few more individual words to consider. Mark's gospel, as usual translated, says that Yeshua preached in their synagogues through all Galilee and cast out devils. For instance, Mark 1:39. The word for preach here is maraz, which means to declare, from the Semitic root shar, to engrave, make a mark, or cause something to be apparent. We should not imagine that Yeshua would come into a village and preach a typical Sunday sermon based on theology or a collection of ideas that did not exist. The word translated synagogues is no shota, from a compound root that simply means an established gathering place. Did you hear that? Not the same meaning at all. This was not a purposely built religious gathering place, but simply the largest house in the village where community meeting would take place. Yeshua would appear in the largest gathering place and say, "Here I am," given the power of word of mouth in ancient times. No wonder people flocked in with their ailments. Finally, the word translated devils or demon is the Aramaic, shida, from the root shushdi, which points to a force of desire that becomes its own self and acts against nature or to devastate nature, including human nature. I mean here, nature as a living being, not nature as a collection of objects. Do you understand what he means by that? Nature as a living being, not as a collecting of objects. It means it's not a tree. It's not just the water. It's not the grass. It's not the apple tree. It's not this, in other words, nature, the wind, the this, the that. It is you and you are it. It is you and you are it. And it is you and you are it. It is not your chair. It is not disembodied from you. You are it. It is you. Does that make sense? So that's why he says, right? Which points to a force of desire that becomes its own self and acts against nature or to devastate nature. In other words, to be demon possessed. And they're going to break it down. Meant you were not yourself. You were not connected to nature. You were not connected to yourself. I mean here nature as a living being, not nature as a collection of objects. Similarly, various ancient traditions speak of elementals and other living beings that exist in the unseen atmosphere and affect the world around them. Today we tend to shy away from words like devil and demon, yet most of us can still recognize a bad atmosphere when we enter a room or for a group meeting. Right large, we can see these examples of mental emotional viruses that affect the world around us. We can, in fact, see many modern channels of information and social media actively promoting such viruses or sustaining them for their own profit. We call them also egregores. They're considered egregores. If they find receptors within us, right? Meaning if we're receptive to evil. If you start getting creeped out, going, "Oh my God, I'm being cursed," and then you bring breath to it, you bring life to it, and it starts becoming a snowball effect of your fears because you feel like they're devil and you've been cursed, and you know this shit just starts taking its own life. And you start being disconnected to your true organic self and to nature. And you start creating something of a nightmare. And it's all in your own creation. Okay. The question returns where so many people afflicted with birth defects, illnesses of various sorts, and ruined state of their breath and consciousness in those days. Yes, it's likely they were. Remember that the whole area has been dominated by various empires for centuries. Then when a local family of Judeans, the Maccabees, finally threw out the remainder of the Greek Empire, the Seleucids, the Maccabees fell to squabbling among themselves. One group of them called in Big Brother, the Romans, to help. The Roman Empire promptly took over, installing puppet kings like Herod the Great to rule. When they failed, the Romans would appoint prefects like Pontius Pilate, who ruled Judea in Yeshua's time. This was depressing enough that poor people, who were the large majority of the population, also found it physically traumatic. Well, fuck. They're literally crucifying people. You're watching people you love or you worked with dying slowly on the cross. Way before Yeshua ever ended up there. So yeah, that would be traumatic. You're seeing people being tortured. You're seeing people being, their lives ripped out of their hands, killed for no other reason than the whim of some of the Roman soldiers. Yeah, that would be traumatic. So of course they say this was depressing enough for poor people who found it physically traumatic. And we all know today, what is the word for trauma? Pain body. Their rulers taxed them unmercifully, forcing most of them off the land to find work with a few rich patrons, whom they were expected to call father. As mentioned, people could arrive at your home and take your children into slavery. Living continuously in such an atmosphere would have not only contributed to extreme poverty and birth defects, but also, in our terms, to various dissociative disorders and likely physical abuse within families. Instead of post-traumatic stress syndrome, most people live with continual trauma. The passage that follows precedes the house divided against itself, saying, we'll take a few more key words from it. And the scribes which came down from Jerusalem said, He hath Beelzebub, and by the prince of the devils casteth he our devils. And he called them unto him, and said unto them in parables, How can Satan cast out Satan? Mark 3:22-23. As mentioned earlier, neither ancient Hebrew nor Aramaic capitalized letters, so words like Beelzebub and Satan are not names of single entities other than the type of mental emotional virus alluded to above. The word for Beelzebub is Beelzebub, a compound made up of, and he says these words, I'm not going to say it, a power that disrupts natural harmonious movement and causes one's sense of life to degenerate into what is totally superficial. The second half of the word comes from the root zebi, which points to boiling, seething water, or the swarming of insects. Both movements presented to the ancient mind the impression of tumult. We could say that the Aramaic here invokes a mind or consciousness in chaos. The phrase prince of devils is brisha, daiva. The first word points to any summit or the beginning of a process. The second, usually translated devils or demons, points again through its roots to what divides a person, causing pain and disability. Finally, at the end of the passage, we have Sathana, which we found in chapter 5 from its root, Seth. This point to a veil that covers one's light or natural intelligence. It is also something translated to adversary, which is closer to the way that ancient people probably understood the word. In this sense, it is similar to the enemy, one which is out of step with you, as we saw in chapter 4. Not surprisingly, Yeshua emphasized to his student in Mark that in response to all these influences in the unseen world, they need to allow the light of their own intelligence to shine clearly from its original source in words similar to those we explored from Matthew in chapter 5. He tells them not the veil, the soul's ability to know clearly by placing it under a measure, but to allow the light to radiate fully through their own being. Did you hear what that means? Do you know what that means? There was never a devil. They never believed in the devil. They were conquered people who were fucking traumatized. Sounds familiar, right? It's happening now to another set of people. And these people were so traumatized. There were birth defects. There were miscarriages. There was famine. There was, in other words, they were so traumatized they could not center themselves, and they had forgotten the breath, the power of the breath, to go through a reset, to heal, to make the right action, to make right decisions. It's amazing, isn't it? So again, the book is called Revelations of the Aramaic Jesus by Neil Douglas-Klotz. I'm going to leave it there. I think you get the picture of why it's important to read from smart scholars who are spiritualists, who really want to understand, be it Buddha, Krishna, Jesus, and probably Muhammad. I would say that maybe they also have. I'm pretty sure every ancient holy book has some problems because the translation was so faulty. And so, and frankly, some of the translations were purposely corrupted. How else are you going to control millions of people if you're the 1%? Never forget who controlled and who put these books together and why. Never forget. That doesn't mean that Yeshua didn't exist. It means that how he existed, it's our responsibility to go out there and seek the truth. Sending you much love on your journey. This video will be on YouTube. Watch my other videos on Mary Magdalene and Yeshua, on the Ascension, on star seeds, on our origins, and where we were first made before we ever took our incarnations on